This is Angel Miller, and as you may have realized, I'm going to be doing some occasional interviews with authors and other interesting people. And today I'm speaking with Aki Cederberg, author of Journeys in the Kali Yuga and the upcoming Holy Europe. And we're going to talk about Yule and about tradition, paganism, and spirituality. Aki Cederberg, thanks for joining us.
Good to be here. Happy Yule.
Thank you. Happy Yule to you as well. So we've spoken before about your last book, Journeys in the Kali Yuga, and you now have a new book out in Finnish, which is also planned to be released in 2021 in an English edition. So maybe you could just tell us a little bit about your recent writing and your upcoming book.
Yes. So this is a continuation of Journeys in the Kali Yuga. Journeys in the Kali Yuga is a book about my sort of long pilgrimage into the Indian tradition of sort of the Indian esoteric tradition into which I received an initiation. And upon the sort of culmination of that journey, I realized that, my true calling is to return to my homeland and sort of use the knowledge or perhaps even wisdom that I gleaned from this Indian experience and use it to point to the holy and to the gods in my own lands and for my own people, because I'm not an Indian. An Indian is sort of it's synonymous with being a Hindu almost.
Right.
So it's like, but I can never be that because I'm not an Indian.
Right. Yeah.
So without sort of abandoning my own cultural background, I would, and my family, basically, I could never be that. So sorry, did you want to say something?
Oh no, I was just going to mention that some Indian people, some Hindus use, or maybe a lot of Hindus actually use Hindu as an ethnic term and not a religious term, the way we do in the West. So, and they would say that a Muslim who was born in India is a Hindu. So,
right, that's true. Yeah, it's because it is an ethnic religion,
yeah.
And it's like you're a Hindu whether you're an atheist or a
right.
Polytheist or theist or whatever you want to call it. You can
right.
All that sort of is included under the umbrella of being a Hindu. So I wanted to find the same thing for my world, which is Finland, the North,
right.
and Europe.
Yes.
Because Europe is my spiritual homeland.
Right.
And we've lost our initiatory sort of lines and living authentic teachers. And so we have this problem that we don't really have sort of the authentic line of teachers and this wisdom tradition that would be living to guide us. And so we are facing this huge problem. And then we have this Christianity, which has sort of been superimposed on Europe and, of course, merged with paganism or the pre-Christian religions. And so it's quite the maze for the European to sort of find his spiritual center, and that center, which I talk about in this book, being this world tree or this world pillar, is really what I'm trying to look for in this book, Holy Europe, and this sort of encompasses 9 worlds of the European world tree, 9 branches of the European world tree. So I explore the Baltic world, Italy, the Germanic tradition, Scandinavia, Iceland, France, and sort of the esoteric history of France, including also Christianity, Spain, Italy, I already said, and some hermetic gardens in Portugal.
Oh wow!
And so but it's not like complete. It's not a map.
Sure.
It's more I'm trying to find sort of the inner essence and seeing if I could find like the outer living form of those things in contemporary Europe. And it's also sort of a poetic picture of the time. So I'm also describing this experience of traveling through Europe and I'm trying to find these things for myself, of course, also. Why is that I just feel very comfortable with with certain things in Europe and traveling, I can find a resemblance, from my own Finnish tradition. When I travel to Spain, I can find similar things there. So what are those things? So it is
Right.
this holy world that I'm trying to explore, and I have to say it's also like I'm trying to be fair towards Christianity. Also, I'm not trying to be anti-Christian in
Right. Right.
this book. I'm trying to understand that these two threads of paganism and Christianity are really the basic sort of streams of Western civilization, and
Right.
the sometimes antagonism of those
Yeah.
things, and sometimes the coexistence of those streams. So
Right.
these are
Exactly.
really the two streams that Europe is built on. So sorry, this
Yes.
was a long-winded explanation of
No.
the
No.
book,
No.
but
Not at all. That's
that's what
great.
it's about.
Yeah, no, fabulous, and I really enjoy journeys in the Kali Yuga, and I'm definitely looking forward to Holy Europe being out in a English language edition, hopefully very soon. But something you said reminded me of G.K. Chesterton's comment on new paganism or neo paganism, which he was very much against. But he we're going to talk about Yule and Christmas and traditions related to the season. But he made this comment that if the only way to celebrate a tradition that goes back to pre-Christian times or to pagan tradition is to practice, the Christian tradition at Christmas or at Easter, because Christianity absorbed all of these pagan traditions, and so you have this living link through Christianity back to paganism, which obviously is a very controversial idea, and he was using it as a criticism of the new paganism, saying that there's no actual living link. But I grew up in England, and you grew up in Finland, and I'm sure, nevertheless, we can find all kinds of strange superstitions and traditions that don't exist elsewhere, that do kind of reflect this ancient paganism, either within Christianity or without. And maybe we can just talk a little bit about Yule and the Yule traditions, some of which might be from the Renaissance or late medieval period, or before or after. But that in itself seems to be a kind of mix of Christianity with paganism, that the decorating of the tree and so on. So maybe could you tell us just a little bit about what is Yule or Christmas, and what is it for, and why are we celebrating it in this wintry season?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and Chesterton also wrote that something along the lines of that: so strong is tradition that later generations will dream of something which they have never seen.
Yeah, right.
And I think I've always been one of those dreamers. I dream
Right.
of something I've never seen, and I'm reaching for something that I'm not sure what it is. But
Right.
I have a belief in the vision that there is something to this dream.
Yeah.
And yeah, when I was a child, some of my earliest memories revolve around Yule.
Yeah.
Just I think one of my first memories is being in a sled of some sort on Yule Eve, and we had a very big family Yule, for Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, always for 2 days, sometimes 3 days straight. We would get together with this very big family, the bigger family consisting of several families. And I guess one of my first memories is on my way home in a sled from one of those things. I'm lying in a sled and I'm looking up at the starry, dark sky, and I have this sense of sort of deep connection with something like a family and a tradition and a world, and also this sense of slightly frightening sort of expanded space that just goes on, because
Right.
the starry sky in Yule time can be quite impressive in the north here.
Yes.
So that is one of my earliest memories, and always also from my childhood I remember this sense of otherworldliness that started to sort of creep into the world, sort of just from the early December. Just the rituals and the smells and the decorations coming up, and there would be the sense of something that was otherworldly and yet utterly familiar at the same time.
Right.
So it was this like very primal thing, slightly frightening, but also very exciting. And so it's I think there's some paradoxes to Yule in this sense, that it does have this sort of mysterious, otherworldly quality to it, which at the same time is very familiar. And I think Yule is very important. Yule is derived from Yule is this old Germanic word, which I understand one definition of it is wheel.
Right, yeah.
So we are sort of celebrating the cyclical worldview. This is a cyclical, celebration of cyclical reality. In the deepest darkness of night and winter, the light is born anew. The world is sort of reborn. And we are celebrating the cyclical reality of things, both, within man and without man. So it's sort of the outer celebration is a mirror of what is happening inside of man. Like when it is darkest, we turn towards this inner flame, this inner light, and we guide it and we try to grow it so it will bring new life within it. And I think the essence of this wheel, this Yule, even the words sound very similar, is this idea that we are connected to this greater cyclical reality as human beings, this sort of timeless reality, and connecting with these greater cycles than our own temporal reality, which is time-bound, we can become part of something which is, beyond time. So I think that is one of the most central sort of metaphysical aspects of Yule that we're really celebrating. This is the most important celebration in the heart of European spiritual tradition, be it paganism or Christianity, or a combination of both. I think it is the most important celebration. And again, historically, I think also there's an interpretation that Yule derives from this ancient feast, Yule feast.
Right.
That would be quite different in nature than perhaps the feast that we have now.
Yes.
But nevertheless, there is evidence that there was a feast called Yule, which would be then in the Germanic world a midwinter celebration. And deities connected to this is of course Odin, the shadowy sort of seeker of knowledge god, central in the Norse pantheon, and also Frey. And because in midwinter you would also celebrate this Freyblot, and Frey is this from this other family of gods called the Vanir. And in some of these celebrations, Frey was the central god of Yule, and you would eat this boar, wild boar, which was Frey's animal in celebration of Frey. So this animal would be sacrificed. And this is one interpretation of where we have the origin of the Yule ham. At least in I don't know how it is in Britain or America, but in Scandinavia you tend to eat ham.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's like the central thing you eat.
Ah, okay. Yeah, in Britain, people tend to eat turkey, and my experience of America is that Christmas is not quite so set as a tradition, because it's slightly overshadowed, at least in comparison to Europe, overshadowed by Thanksgiving, which is about a month beforehand. So it tends to be a little less formal, even in regard to what you eat. So.
Yeah, and I think like Yule is a strange thing because people have such different, it's kind of like it's the central celebration among all these different European sort of branches.
Yeah.
And then people are really, some people really dislike it because of the over commercialization.
Yes.
That's associated with it, and this sort of superficial jollity and then I understand it, but I think people would be wise to understand that beyond all these banal things, there is, like a deeper reality. Like I understand that some people get very depressed around Christmas because a celebration that basically should highlight, it's a celebration of family and clan and tribe and connection and children and grandparents and all these things coming together.
Yeah.
And when you don't have that, or you have a family that's dysfunctional, it will heighten, of course, the experience of sorrow and disconnection. So it's like, I understand why some people who have those childhood experiences, really hate Christmas, because it's going to highlight this lack of connection, which is really at the center of Yule, is the idea that we're part of a chain, that we have ancestors and we have descendants, and we are a living link in this chain, and we're celebrating this chain.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
and even the over commercialization, even the over the gift giving and everything. I mean, the gift giving is rooted in a very central idea of reciprocity between man and the divine.
Right, absolutely.
And we're trying to sort of have a model of the ideal relationship between men and gods by giving. This idea that you give, and that's what functional communities are based on mutual giving.
Right.
And this this means a sacrifice in terms of man and God, or gods.
Yes.
So it's good that people remember that even the gift giving, that's rooted in sacrifice. That's rooted in these very primal ideas, which are very, very important to understand, because these are at the center of, the sort of European dharma, the European tradition, the right way to do things.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I'm sure most people listening to this will know a little bit about the runes, and of course, even among the runes, there is a rune called gift. So,
it's gifu, yes, exactly. And that's like this equilateral cross, which shows you this kind of balanced, point of crossing between two different forces.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, but another thing that you just reminded me of as well. Talking about the wheel of the cycle of the year. I don't know if you've ever read Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, but it's an Arthurian legend. But it begins at Christmas, and they're celebrating Christmas, and a green knight appears, who symbolizes nature, and then the rest of the legend is the journey to the Green Knight's chapel, which ends a year later, also at Christmas. So definitely this sort of cyclical idea carried into Christianity later on from its pagan roots. Yeah.
I have actually not read the original story, but I have, I'm aware of it.
Yeah.
And there is actually a really good a book for children or for younger audiences called The Spirit of Yule, put out by Thomas Rowsell.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Survive the Jive.
Right.
Sort of YouTube guy.
Yeah.
And I can really recommend that book, because that incorporates some of the myth that you were just talking about, of this Green Knight and everything. And people, I think it's published by a company called Smile Titans.
Oh, okay.
And I bought it for my own daughter.
Oh, excellent. Great.
And it's got beautiful art and sort of this sort of Dickensian figure sort of traveling back into time on Yule Eve. And it's just a very good story and nice.
Nice. Great. Well, and you were mentioning food, and before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about food, and I was mentioning to you that when I was 16, I became a vegetarian, and I've been eating meat over the last few years, and I've been eating or making food from my childhood and from before that, and I've been making Christmas or Yule food over the last couple of weeks. And, it has this strange effect on you that it kind of thrusts you back into your childhood memories, which as you were alluding to at this time of year, would have been, in a sense, kind of very magical memories. And with that, thrusts you back into this tradition that precedes you. I was making and not to be too trivial, but I was making mince pies, and mince pies actually have a 500-year history behind them. So it even doing that, it would extend you back into the Middle Ages. And
they're delicious too.
They're really good. They are. They are. I'm trying to introduce it to my American friends. So far, so good. But
there was a British woman making those in Helsinki at one point. She would just
really?
hand make those. She was called the pie witch, and we would. And she was this like witch lady that made these like traditional pies, and we would always like get a bunch of those because they were so really good.
Yeah, they're really good. Yeah. And so what are some of the things that people can do, practical things, let's say at Yule to celebrate, whether they're religious or not religious?
I mean, I think this whole religious, not religious, I think Yule is about the sense of mystery at the heart of being alive. It's like embracing the mystery. We can talk about Christianity and we can talk about paganism and all these different sort of but that's all history. The idea is that this mysterious celebration is still at the heart of all Europeans.
Yeah.
From the north to the south, this is an important celebration. And why is that? What are we really celebrating? I think we're celebrating the mystery itself. And it's like this, we don't know everything about Yule.
Right.
But we can embrace the unknown and the uncanny and the divine, the awe, the numinous of existence if we open ourselves up to it.
Right.
And I really dislike when people say, I don't believe in Santa Claus or something. It's like they completely like miss the point of like when you're a child, you come into this world, you have a sense of wonder.
Yeah.
So you believe in Santa Claus as a real figure in some way. Then you sort of lose your faith when you realize, okay, this is just a person dressed up as a mythical being.
Right.
So then most people get stuck in that phase for the rest of their life. And I think it's sad because if they would get over that juvenile state, they would realize that, he is real. He's this person, dressing up as the Yule father, as we call him here, or the Yule goat, which we call him in Finland. They would understand that this is a real being. This is a mythical being. This is a divine being that people are embodying, by dressing up, emulating him.
Right.
So he is real. He's not, of course, real in this sort of silly sense, but I hope people would sort of adjust their understanding of what myths and spirit and tradition mean. We are talking, as they say, myths are things that never happen but are always real or always true.
Right.
And we are sort of celebrating that in Yule.
Yeah.
And I think people should just try to embrace this and embrace the mystery of it all. And I think it's this juxtaposition also of Yule. At least I know this might not be the case in the US from people I've talked to, where it's just about, jolliness and stuff. But in Finland and in Scandinavia, I believe also, it's of course about jolliness and these good things, but it has a somber side. Like the Finnish tradition on Yule Eve is that you go to the graveyard and you light a candle for your ancestors.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's beautiful because it's dark, and then the whole, and if there's snow even, and then the whole graveyard is sort of white and full of candles, and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
So there's this very strong sense of, the ancestors are present. And I think that's a thing about it. It's somber but joyous at the same time. So I think it's really revealing something of the European soul. It's the sense of melancholy and joy at the same time, because these are really part of Yule thing. There's something somber about it.
Yeah.
And it's okay. Like we can embrace, this somber side of it, this melancholy side. But we can also embrace the joy at the same time of it.
Yeah.
I think that's like our soul. That's our spirit there, when we understand this. And I think one thing that this has to do with is mortality.
Right,
Because
absolutely.
this is sort of this always, we're always returning into the same place in Yule. It's always the same traditions. It's always the same rituals that are enacted, the same foods that are eaten,
Yeah,
and we sort of return to this primal home,
yeah,
and we realize that we are mortal, that one
yeah,
day we will die, and that
right.
our parents will die, and our children will die at some point. But in Yule, we are celebrating something which doesn't die,
Yeah,
which is sort of beyond death, and that's that cyclical order, and that's what is embodied by all these things like the evergreen tree and all these
yeah,
symbols of life everlasting
right.
that we are celebrating. And I think there's huge sort of comfort in that and huge solace in that if you can embrace it.
Yeah,
So just I think for people, partaking in whatever traditions that you have been brought up in or which are part of your culture is good.
yeah,
And if you're a Christian, then go to church. But if you're a pagan, try to go somewhere, and invoke the Yule Father, invoke the gods, speak to the gods. This is a time of omens also, and of a giving sacrifice. So I think it's important that people realize that these things, you can't reach the gods just by talking about them or thinking about, or these sort of abstract ways. You have to open your being up to these impressions and experiences of the numinous. And I think Yule is one of the strongest time to do that. So of course it's a family celebration. You should have good food and gifts and jolliness and all these good things. But I think this sort of more serious aspect is also a good prelude to all that sort of fun.
right. Yeah,
We in my house and we have a little group that we've been getting together now for like 7 years or something, and all sort of spiritual holidays. We have both of those things, and we think it's good to expose our children also to both of those things. So we go to
right.
a hilltop or a mountaintop, which is a sacred place for us, a specific place, and we light a fire, and we
Yeah,
have a good surrounded by snow and hovering pines and spruces, and we invoke the Yule Father. And so the Yule Father is also, by the way, an epitaph of Odin.
right.
He's mentioned being the Yule Father. So we raise, toasts, libations to the Yule Father. And yeah, I'm sorry, I'm sort of going all over the place here, but
Oh no, not at all.
I'm having some legs, so maybe that can be excused here.
Yeah, no, that was phenomenal, and actually, it's interesting because I've just been reflecting very much on what you were saying about this, this incorporation of melancholy or slightly darker emotions, and I don't know how it is in Finland, but I think in the English-speaking world, there's a real attempt in the modern age to almost sort of do away with these more complicated emotions and to always be on a high. So that so the idea of we have to feel love and love for everyone all the time, and but there's no sense of we should feel longing or we should feel melancholy or we should feel sadness or anything like this. And these more complicated and darker emotions have always been a part of culture and ritual and great literature and tradition as well, in a certain sense. So in Japan, there's this traditionally this notion of unrequited love is the highest form of love, and all of that seems to be swept away. And it seems like perhaps Yule and ritual and this time of year and other seasonal celebrations might give us a chance to become, in a sense, sort of whole again, emotionally, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. And I think to sort of get back to something you said about all this cooking too.
Yeah.
I think there's a deeper connection to these things also via cooking. Like
Yeah.
as I was telling you earlier, that when we moved to this house with my family, I've been sort of starting to cook these big meals on these sort of spiritual holidays and high
Yeah.
points, like Easter and like Christmas. And they usually take a lot of preparation and a lot of sort of work. But as you
Yeah.
do them, it sort of connects you to your own these sort of scents from your childhood, like the garlic lamb on Easter,
Right. Right.
and it's just, and then the house is filled with this sense of sort of the virtuous life of settlement and of family, and
Yeah.
of like, okay, now I'm sort of becoming my parents in a way,
Right.
like
Exactly.
you're
Yeah.
doing the same things, and like I remember when I was a kid, and and so it's this like cycle of things, and I think there's something very virtuous and very good about that, and about all
Yeah.
these things, and Yule, of course, is full of all these traditional foods and things which really sort of connect us to that primal place.
Right. Exactly. Absolutely.
And of course, in the center of all of this is like the tree, and people have
Mm.
said that, is this really like, is this a pagan custom, or is this sort of a later, a later thing?
Right.
And there's different theories about, maybe this was like when they couldn't revere the holy trees and give sacrifice at the root of holy trees
Yeah.
outside, they took the tree inside. This is one theory,
Right.
and then the sacrifices became these gifts that were under the tree, and then there's this, parallels to the tree that was a sacrificial tree, so that these sort of red balls, for instance, on the tree would be sort of offerings of animal parts or meat and
Right.
things like
Yeah.
that. And I mean, there's all these things, and I'm not really a historian, so it's not up to me to decide. But I know that, like, in the center of all these spiritual traditions that we have, whether we talk about the Finnish Sampo or Sammas, the Germanic Yggdrasil or Irminsul, or the
Mm.
Baltic Austras Cox, I mean, these are all holy trees, which are the most important thing at the center of all these sort of pantheons.
Right.
So I do
Yeah.
believe that this idea of a world tree or a world pillar, this is just like a manifestation of that.
Right.
And the same thing with the Father Christmas, Santa Claus, or as he's called here again, as I said, he's called Joulupukki, the Yule goat, which comes from the fact that he's the figure here is a merging of of an earlier tradition of a Finnish celebration of a harvest festival, which is called Kekri, which had a Kekri goat, and the Swedish or the Nordic tradition of having a Yule goat. That the Father Christmas figure was actually sort of a goat that arrived.
Huh.
So that's why you have these sort of straw goats, for instance, that you find in Sweden and even in Finland.
Oh, really?
Sort of
Okay.
little straw goats that everybody puts up as decorations.
Ah.
And even people I talk to, older generations, they remember that when Father Christmas came for a visit, he was dressed in black, and he had like horns hanging from him and bells, and he was way more of this sort of shamanic,
Right.
darker figure than this sort of Coca-Cola
Right.
Santa that we have.
Yeah, that's
today.
right.
That the color red wasn't really, for instance, necessarily associated with,
Right.
pre-1950s.
Yeah.
It wasn't
Yeah.
really that well known to have like the red everything.
Yes.
So and why is this Santa Claus? Why is he so? Why do people like this figure so much? I mean, I think he's an echo of our sort of primal Yule father. He's this
Yeah.
shaman. He's Odin. He's
Yeah.
the Väinämöinen of the Finns. He's the shaman who's riding across the sky and he goes into other worlds to bring back gifts to us, his
Yeah.
children. It's this. I think it's this figure of. He's like a fairy tale version of a European primal god in many
Right.
European cultures, in the Slavic, Baltic, Finnish, Germanic, Anglo-Saxon sort of worlds. I think he's all of these things,
Right.
and
Yeah,
that's why it
absolutely.
resonates. And of course, he's like this mixture of different historical layers, and even Dickensian things, and like made to be sort of child friendly and everything. But he's still this, at the root of it. It's not Jesus.
No.
This is what I was always confused being a kid. I was like,
Right.
I love Christmas, but I really don't get what any of this like evergreen trees and jolly and little elves everywhere, and the gifts and the Santa Claus and all this. I had no idea, how does this tie into some place in the desert and people wearing like turbans,
Right.
and like as a child, these were questions that I asked, like,
Yeah.
what, and the same thing I asked on Easter, like, what does the Easter bunny have to do with Jesus?
Right.
Like, but there's some truth to these very childlike questions and sort of
Yeah.
epiphanies, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and they've been a long time in the making, ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, they're like these eternal reflections, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
And I think it's such a good time for people to really sort of, there's also this paradox of Yule, is that it's in the Finnish sources, sometimes it's mentioned to be this day of like heavy drinking, heavy feasting, singing, and sort of backwards doing. And I've understood that in for instance, in England back in the day, it used to be more like that people it was more rowdy, you know.
Right, I'm sure. Yeah.
And this is kind of like an echo of the Saturnalia, the
Yeah.
Roman, which would be a day when like slaves were kings, and like they would have their freedom to do whatever they wanted, and people would get drunk, and like all these norms were broken in this sort of
Right.
controlled period of time.
Yeah.
So we have that sort of inverse doing in Yule, which is still sort of part of it. People drink a lot in Yule, at least in Finland.
Sure.
But then there's also this sense of a sacred, inviolable peace, because there's this idea of sacred peace, which also goes back to these pre-Christian spiritual ideas connected with the god Frey. A sacred inviolability, this idea of a peace when no judgments are sort of made, and no sort of laws are, things are like, okay, we can do these things, but we're going to have a pause for everyone.
Right. Yeah.
That people can just be still and be at peace, and it was
Right.
sacred peace. And that's why even in the Finnish world nowadays, it's like on Christmas Eve at 12 o'clock, the state has in every city this sort of the mayor of the city comes out on a balcony, and people are gathered, and he will declare Christmas peace, and he says,
really?
whoever breaks this peace, will be put in very serious trouble, because you cannot break this sacred peace. This is now like
Right.
sacred peace. It's not just a local peace, but it's like a holy peace. So there is this aspect also, I think, of of stillness and of peace, and of sort of letting go of the chaos and the violence of the world for a little bit.
Right.
A rest.
Absolutely.
And I think it's a time when people should come and sort of reflect on things,
Yeah.
on their lives, and what they really want to carry to the next sort of wheel of the year of time.
Right. Yeah. Definitely. Well, on that note, where is the best place for people to get hold of your books, or to find out more about you, or to follow you on social media?
Yeah, I have an Instagram. It's Aki Cederberg, Facebook public page, and I have a website called akicederberg.com. And, you can find me if you put my name in YouTube. You can watch several interviews, and iTunes, I think there's podcasts, and my book is out in English on Inner Traditions, and
Yeah.
I will post on my social media and website about the coming book, Holy Europe, which has really been my sort of life work for the last several years. And actually in this book, I also have a full year sort of about sacred time, where I just I sort of go through a full year of describing these sort of rituals of sacred time, and Yule, of
Oh,
course, is one
yeah.
of them. And so if I seem like I have a lot to say, it's because I think just this Yule is such a fascinating subject. I could talk about it forever because I do think there's so much there,
Yeah,
and it's
absolutely.
like at the same time it's familiar and otherworldly,
Yeah,
and it's this time when people can really connect with something deep and eternal. And I hope people do that, whether they're nominally Christian or pagan, but speak to the gods and make offerings and be with your family and invoke.
absolutely. Well, on that note, happy Yule to you.
Happy Yule.